Bethesda is dead. Some people would say, but it's not quite the case. I think people are wrong about Bethesda. Some are saying that their games are masterpieces and some that they're complete trash. I wanted to take some time just to talk a little bit about the negative points of Bethesda and how they can improve on things. While this video will focus a lot on the more negative sides, there is also some positives that are gonna come as well. So first of all, let's focus on Bethesda's emphasis on scale rather than quality in their products. So Starfield, we're gonna start with the elephant in the room, is irresponsibly big. A lot of people would argue that Starfield would have benefited from having a lot less planets to explore with more variety and things to do on them, and I would have to agree. I guess it's cool to have an entire galaxy of planetary systems to explore on paper, but if I'm being completely honest, even hearing that doesn't really sound fun. Even if all those planets had amazing detail, numerous cities, a lot of colorful and interesting characters to talk to, it still would be too much. It gets to a point where everything gets overwhelming and you would just get bored of it, no matter how good it could be. But even as I say that, that would still be a better scenario than what we actually got. Starfield was sadly doomed to fail from the start. Pair that with that engine that doesn't allow seamless space exploration and the load screens of Doom, and then we got a recipe for disaster. Bethesda's philosophy behind this was that once they got the means to create a few planets, adding more and more is not a lot of work given that it's all procedurally generated, and they said to themselves, why not? Well, that decision made the game's flaws a lot more apparent, and you'll have the same bandit outposts or settlements literal light years away. The same type of buildings, similar terrain, except one is more gray and one is more brown, and that breaks the immersion for anyone playing this game. Which is why a more small but nuanced focus would have been a lot better for the game. Next up would be the updates, remasters, and re-releases that this company keeps doing. It's gotten to a point many years ago where this was a meme and the meme keeps going, man. We all know the meme of Bethesda releasing Skyrim on every possible piece of technology, and while it's funny, it's true and sad. And I haven't seen many people complain about it, which kind of annoys me as well because it is pretty ridiculous. When the Skyrim Special Edition came out in 2016, that was fine. It's a lot more stable version of the 2011 game and ensures that everyone playing SE has all the DLCs and makes modding a lot simpler. But then update after update after update, the game keeps getting worse and worse. When the Anniversary Edition came out in 2021, the mods broke again and also divided the modding community into two camps. There's the people that didn't want to update to the AE, so they stayed on SE and they kept all their mods on the 1.5.97 version. And then there's the people that either got Skyrim for the first time or got back into Skyrim after a long time or just updated and they got the newer version. But then when it comes to modding specifically, I'm going to speak about modding because I do have a channel that focuses just on Skyrim mods. When it comes to modding specifically, you have two versions of the same mod that need to be released if you want the mod basically to be successful, or you need another mod that would make that mod compatible with the last version, because otherwise people who are stuck on SE would not play that mod, which is the case for many players. But even if you weren't modding, these updates usually tend to break the game and they don't really add much except new items from the Creation Club, which are paid mods that Bethesda are selling, which I'm not even gonna get into, but that whole thing is very controversial. There's a lot of people that don't really complain about it, but then there's a lot of aspects of it that are pretty predatory, such as people being able to take some free version of a mod and then charge for it in the Creation Club, or let's say something is actually generally good, but then it's priced massively. But now going back to the update situation, let's just assume that you don't mind your mods breaking and that you don't mind new items being added to the microtransaction store. Let's call it as it is. Breaking the game better bother you, and that's what happened in April 2024 with the Fallout 4 Next Gen update, making the game perform far worse on PC, especially if you had some mods that change up the look of NPCs. That was a new bug that was introduced, which is so stupid. It's such a weird and specific bug. There's been extreme visual glitches such as this and that, and the exclamation points all over, and these exclamation points essentially point out that the item is not rendering or something. Whatever it is, something's gone wrong and you can clearly see it. Juicehead also pointed out that the UI in the new widescreen mode would simply be stretched across your screen, so they literally just added pixels without any other considerations, which makes this seem so much worse when mods were created without this issue prior. And the most shameful aspect is that this was announced 18 months before it released. How long did they actually work on this update, and how long were they just saying that they were gonna work on the update? It gives you a glimpse into the shitty quality assurance that they're doing before releasing a product, and it's truly shameful. I'm surprised Starfield itself wasn't as broken on release. I mean, even Starfield didn't have DLSS or an FOV slider at launch, which is just confusing as to why not. It seems like such a no-brainer to add to your game. But it has pronouns though, which I'm not gonna bitch about. I don't really see a problem with that, but it's just funny that there was a whole meme around it. And that's currently the case with Skyrim and Fallout 4. But then there's also Oblivion and the Fallout 3 remasters / remakes, whatever they are, coming soon. I don't know what you guys are expecting with these, but one thing to keep in mind is that the reports are saying that Virtuos would be in charge of the Oblivion remaster at least. Apparently, Bethesda is still overlooking the project, which makes sense because it's their IP, but it makes the whole situation a lot more complicated, and it makes it so difficult to predict the outcome. It could be still really good, but there's a lot of signs pointing to it just being a mess. I can see why they're making those remasters though. It brings new life to these projects, and it gives new players who haven't experienced Oblivion and Fallout 3 before a push to do so. These will probably be day one on Game Pass as well, encouraging people to subscribe and stay subscribed since these are long games, and it gives them a renewed life. It also gives console players a chance to play the new versions of Oblivion as well, since Skyblivion will only be available on PC. So there are benefits, but will the quality be there? I guess only time can tell. What annoys me and many other gamers with these releases is that they will probably have a stain on the legacy of these games, and say what you will about Oblivion and Fallout 3, I love these games and many others do, but what will make me hate them will be performance issues and numerous bugs and glitches, so let's hope they at least keep it clean. Sure, I really want to see a lot of improvements, especially on the graphical side and maybe even on the NPC AI side, but I really don't want them to break the games, even if the original release was actually broken on to begin with, but still, I don't want it to get worse. But then there's also another negative thing. Instead of putting 100% of their energy developing new games such as an Elder Scrolls 6 or even a new Fallout spin-off or a mainline game, I don't really care what it would be, they're focusing on these quick remasters that somehow still takes them years to develop, and if they end up being bad, there will be even more to get mad about. Then there's the long dev cycles and the gaps between releases that are just getting out of hand at this point. Then we got big name developers such as Will Shen and Daryl Bringer that leave the company. They worked on quest design and level designs for Bethesda games for many years now, and a few months ago they gave a retrospective presentation in which they discussed some frustrations they have working with the company. When it comes to development, Bethesda is using a lot of their old ways of working, which makes it very inefficient considering that the company grew a lot in the past years, and it feels like they're still growing at an exponential rate.
So moving forward, we know we have to deal with this new issue of scale, and how do we work with this incredibly large team? So let's talk about Starfield. So by the time we ship Starfield, we have grown even more, probably by about the same amount from Fallout 4 to Fallout 76, as you can see here. Well over 500 people, but also we are now working with a large number of external groups, well over a dozen, and these groups are doing everything from effects, lighting, they're working on tools programming, systems programming, pretty much everything, and they have to all be integrated into the development team for the work they are doing. And another part of this is these are external groups, each with their own culture, each with their own leadership, and they are being brought in at various times throughout production, sometimes early on, sometimes to finish it.
They scaled up during the development of 76 a lot since previous projects, making collaborations and communication within the company a lot more difficult. It's a lot easier to collaborate with a small team in an office since you can always walk down to Bill's office and ask him some questions, and he can take a few minutes to walk you through his way of thinking, and while you're both there, Margaret from the art design team can also join in and give her take. When you're working with hundreds of people across multiple studios in different cities, these systems don't really work anymore. You'd have to jump on a Teams or a Zoom call and find the right scheduling and all of that, competing with 7 other people who have questions to Bill. So then these collaboration sessions are either postponed or they become emails where a lot of sense is lost, and people usually respond to emails within 2 business days, turning what was once a 30-minute debriefing session into a multi-week process.
Life becomes a lot more focused on our task tracking software. We were using Jira at the time. Jira definitely became a way of life as we tried to reconcile and handle all of the work being done across so many people.
If you're not familiar with Jira, in simple terms, it's the tracking tool that a lot of developers and people in IT use to track the time a task was updated, what was done, and notify the team of the changes that was made. It's a great tool, but if all your time is spent basically telling people what you've done instead of actually doing stuff, it's kind of counterproductive.
And the process we ended up settling on was one that was departmental focused. So we had all of the approvals handled by a departmental lead who also had a departmental producer. So for example, quest design, there was a lead quest designer. I was the lead quest designer for Starfield. I had a design producer specific to quest, and we would go through all of the requests and proposals, approve them, and then send that up to a member of senior leadership who would also approve them.
This is definitely an issue that happens as you add more people onto a project. It is something we call Brooks' Law, where adding more people onto a project doesn't always improve the productivity and can even reduce it. I mean, imagine 2 people screwing in a light bulb. Did we really need 2 people assigned to this task? You had to pay 2 people and there wasn't much difference as if you only hired 1 for the same outcome, basically. I mean, yeah, you could argue that one of them was holding the ladder while the other one was screwing in a light bulb. But then imagine 6 people doing that. Do you really need 5 people holding a ladder? The next point is actually laughable.
And finally, we had to do a lot more tutorials. So I was in OBS Studio a lot making video tutorials. So on Fallout 4, when I needed to teach someone the tool set, I would just sit down with them and answer their questions. But now we were working with people from around the nation, sometimes around the globe. I often didn't know when they would need me, and I often didn't know who might need me or what they would need to know. So it became absolutely critical to do a lot more tutorials and how-tos about every feature of the toolkit.
Will Shen was spending his time making tutorials on how to use the creation engine and its tools rather than his actual job. I actually don't really mind the creation engine as much as other players in the industry. I really like the flexibility you have and the physics system that comes with it. But one of the disadvantages that comes with having a proprietary engine is that it's not a standard in the industry and not everyone is comfortable with it right away. If a developer was very used to working in Unreal, switching to creation can be a challenge and will require a lot of training and onboarding. But when we have the top dogs to be in charge of the training and tutorials, we got a problem. Now, as I said, these 2 top dog employees at Bethesda left as Starfield released. And that was probably due to a bonus being issued at the release of Starfield, which made it actually a perfect time for them to leave. It's not really confirmed, it's just like a theory that everyone has, and it kind of makes sense. I encourage you, if you want to know more about this, watch the full conference and the link will be in the description. I just selected some of my highlights, but there is actually a lot more said. Moving on to our next point, there's a lot of delusion within the company and this culture of toxic positivity where they're told that they can do nothing wrong and they're doing great and gamers are just being mean online. There are a few quotes from Bethesda higher-ups like Todd Howard and Emil Pagliarulo that I can show here, such as, "I think in a lot of ways Starfield is the hardest thing Bethesda has ever done. We pushed ourselves to make something totally different, to just jam into an Xbox the biggest, richest space exploration RPG anyone could imagine. That we pulled it off makes Starfield something of a technical marvel. It's also, in a lot of ways, the best game we've ever made. But for us, most importantly, Starfield has its own unique personality and now sits right next to Fallout and Elder Scrolls. I don't complain about games on social media for 2 main reasons. 1, I know how hard it is to make games and have too much respect for my fellow devs. 2, I work for a game studio and it would just be uncool and unprofessional for me to do so."
You know, look, the stuff that we do, you reach a level of popularity and a hype, and you just have to understand, like, for us, I know a lot of that comes with it. Okay, and you do grow a pretty thick skin if you really want to do this. You have to grow a thick skin in accepting the criticism. That's what makes us better. It does affect people here. They put their hearts and souls into these projects for years and years, and they care about it, all of us, so much, to do the best job that we can. If it's not living up to what they want out of it, we expect that criticism. We need to hear it and we need to get better and we're really, really welcoming of it. We're actually like our harshest critics here.
Before any hardcore Bethesda fans come at me, these were taken slightly out of context. And before any Bethesda haters come at me, there's still a lot of indication of toxic positivity and PR talk in them. Emil's not saying here that Starfield is the best game they've ever made. What I'm getting from what he said is that if you're looking at what they were able to achieve given the technical limitations they had within the creation engine, it's impressive. And if you're looking at the enhancement with the technology compared to previous BGS games, it's also technically the best. And that I guess I can agree with. I'm not a dev and I don't really know what it takes to get there, but I do take his word for it. But then on the other hand, I can make the argument that a space exploration game within the creation engine simply does not work because the engine requires splitting the whole game space into multiple smaller cells for it to function, and this whole thing makes it rely on loading screens constantly and makes seamless space to orbit transitions basically impossible. What they were able to achieve in the creation engine is impressive, I give them that. But at the end of the day, does it really matter when there's other game studios that don't have those technical limitations that can make an objectively more seamless and subjectively better game? As the player, you should really ask yourself that. And if you say that you don't mind the loading screens, you're well within your right. I'm not here to push you into any corner, but seamlessness is a characteristic of video games in the modern era that is becoming the standard in terms of quality, and Bethesda is 100% lagging behind. And there are other aspects of Starfield that are also lagging behind, not only because of the engine, but also because of the design philosophy. But this video is not a critique on Starfield, I'm just here to point out some things. I could really go in depth, but this is not the video for it. And Emil also says that he doesn't complain about games on social media for two reasons. That people don't know how hard it is to make games, and that it's just so uncool. Look, if the reviews are angry and people are being mean and they're throwing insults and threat at you constantly, that is not cool. But criticism and feedback is more than cool. It's a privilege to have people share what they think about your game, and I know Emil knows that. I think complaining about how hard you work is valid, but you gotta do it some other place than Twitter. But then if you want to grow and get better at something, you need to take that criticism, think about it, and apply what you've learned. And if I were to add another point, setting industry standards and comparing studios is a good thing for the community. Silencing critics is ultimately bad for the community as a whole, kind of like saying that games like Baldur's Gate makes players expect too much and that it's not realistic to make games as good. You're starting to sound like Eve Gamon at this point, you know? But then on the other hand, you have to be fair to Emil. And you can hate the guy's work and attitude all you want, but I don't think I want to imagine the amount of hate that this guy gets because people are unhappy with the recent games. But when Todd Howard said that BGS has a target painted on their backs, I would actually have to agree with him that once you reach a point of popularity within a community or industry, you're bound to get some really passionate fans, and you do need thick skin.
These franchises and the time that people spend in the games, they're really, really important to them. It's not always pleasant to read. No, it's like you wish people would be nicer, but it does matter a lot to them. And so I usually, and yeah, well, the answer is yes, it does affect people here. Mm-hmm. They put their hearts and souls into these projects for years and years, and they care about it, all of us, so much to do the best job that we can. But at the end of the day, the fans and the consumers, they should, if it's not living up to what they want out of it, we expect that criticism. We need to hear it and we need to get better. And we're really, really welcoming of it. We're actually like our harshest critics here in terms of all of that.
I agree with what he's saying, except when he says that they're their own harshest critics. I mean, I can't really believe that statement when we have people like Emil, and I don't want to single him out, he's just the biggest hated name in the company at the moment, saying stuff like Starfield is the greatest game in many ways, when most of the criticism coming their way about Starfield is negative. Look, I'll give you one. The vehicle customization in Starfield is a lot better than previous Bethesda games. Mostly because there wasn't any vehicle customization before, but that is one aspect of Starfield that is very good compared to previous games. But you know what I mean when I'm singling out one single feature and not looking at the whole thing? Another example would be that, at least in my opinion, Starfield is the Bethesda game with the best shooting. I like Fallout, but Starfield to me feels a little bit better to shoot in. So I understand that they really want to take their wins and make those as public as possible, but you really can't hide all the flaws and expect people to just ignore and forget about them. One other thing that I want to give Bethesda is that they experiment with things, and when it doesn't work out, they adapt. They did that with the voice protagonist in Fallout 4.
Well, in that case, I want a Nuka-Cola, some stim packs, Kasumi Nakano returned to her family, and, a pony.
It was cool to try, but people didn't really like it, so they removed it in 76 and Starfield. Hopefully, they're removing it from any other future games as well. They also got the criticism of the main story of Fallout 4, where your son was kidnapped, your wife was murdered, but you were having a great time building shacks and planting tomatoes. There's that sense of urgency that people didn't really like because it was kind of unimmersive to just do side quests when something so important is happening in your life. So they did adapt with Starfield, making the main story less urgent. Granted, arguably, they have rolled back a little too much with the main story, but it's criticism that is still listened to. Now I'm gonna take a page from Bethesda's book and complain about the fans. You there, watching this video, you're the problem. Obviously, I'm just kidding. People are passionate, we get that, and we love that. But I think the way that the internet is nowadays, people's extreme opinions are louder and louder. Whether it's about people loving Bethesda and believing in everything they do, or those who hate Bethesda and are shaming others for being optimistic. I think people form echo chambers on the internet where their positive or negative opinions get amplified more and more, creating a sort of blindfold when something that would support the other opinion comes out. And also everything is getting more and more extreme where you can't just have a neutral or slightly positive or slightly negative opinion on something. It really has to be 100% leaning to one direction or another. And now I'm describing video game discourse, but this argument is valid for sports, politics, religion, and all the taboo topics that it's great that people are more open to talk about. But then the aggression to which a lot of these topics are brought up doesn't create a welcoming environment for anyone expressing their honest opinion. And it makes actual, honest discussions about any topic a lot more difficult to approach, and in turn shifts the focus from spreading facts to spreading fake and delusional positivity or cynical and insulting negativity. Going back to Bethesda, I don't think they're the greatest company that ever existed. Obviously, this video is focused more on the wrongdoings of Bethesda, and the reason for that is actually more positive than you would expect. You see, I actually like Bethesda. Surprise, surprise, I have 2 channels that talk about Bethesda games. Even as a fan, I think it's important to acknowledge that there are many issues, and if someone truly lost faith in Bethesda and lost interest in their games, well, the good news is that there are other amazing games and studios that will scratch that itch. If Starfield is your favorite Bethesda game, that's good. I'm happy that you're enjoying it. I myself also like Starfield, but I don't like it as much as I like the older Bethesda games. If you hate Starfield and think that it's the worst space game or RPG that you've ever played, alright, there's a lot of issues and it's important that people talk about them if we want things to improve. What sucks is that people will never agree and will try to convince the other that their opinion is the right one, where there's a lot of nuance in fact. I wish Bethesda themselves would take a lot of the points I talked about in this video and other points that critics have brought up and try to apply them in future projects. The extreme positive and extreme negative opinions will only have them focus on what they want to focus, and naturally people want to feel good about themselves and focus on the positives that they're getting. I really want Bethesda to create better games because I know they can. They're very capable, and now that they have the financial backing of one of the biggest companies in the world, it is a possibility. Now, I'm saying all of this because I know they can. Will they? I don't know. Probably not. The way things are going right now, it really seems like they really want to focus on their opinion, seeing that Starfield is the greatest thing that ever happened, and they're just gonna make more of that. But I guess only time will tell. Ultimately, I'd like something to change. I have never seen the fanbase this divided, and the disconnect between the criticism and Bethesda's attitude seems to also widen. You don't see me make negative-ish videos like this very often since I'm overall a pretty positive guy, but I felt like a video like this would be helpful to share my honest opinions and frustrations with the current state of Bethesda, even if, ultimately, I'm a fan, and I still am a fan. Now, as the great Todd Howard once said,
I don't think it's bad for people to miss things.
And I miss the glory days of Bethesda. Now, if you're willing, I'd like to hear from you. Let me know what you thought about this, and if you thought I missed anything, or even if I was wrong about something, please let me know in the comments. And if you did enjoy this video, or you thought some of the points that I had were pretty good or even really bad, consider liking this video and subscribing for more. If you really disagreed, please dislike the video, share your opinion, let me know. Like, hit me with it, you know what I mean? Just please don't be too mean. Don't be too mean about it. A massive thank you to my Patreon supporters who continue to support more and more content here. Your name can also appear at the end of my videos, or you can be roasted to bits if you choose the Nazim Lover tier. Again, not in this video like the previous one, apologies for that, but it didn't really fit into this type of video. But in the next one, I guess we'll see. Now, click on this video if you want to see some positive stuff about Bethesda and what I think about their 2025 plans and leaks that have happened. And if you want to see the greatest Skyrim music video of all time, click right here. Now, you have a few seconds to click. And if you haven't clicked by now, leave me alone.